travel back in time to the 80s, reliving the music.
Everybody have fun tonight. Everybody Wang Chung tonight.
The movies.
Yes! 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 Oh! Oh! Oh!
I'll have what she's having.
And the parties.
No one in my family ever drinks.
That's great. You've probably never run out of ice your whole life.
Because just like you, we're stuck in the 80s.
Sure, it's not 1985 right now, but who knows what tomorrow will bring.
Hey, Brad, look! The light's blinking on the Stuck in the 80s answer machine. That's weird. We never get any calls.
I didn't even know we had an answering machine. Can you still get one of those?
Look here, I'll just click the little button and we'll see what's what.
Yeah. Is this Stuck in the 80s? You guys suck.
Well, that's par for the course. What's the next message?
This message is for Spearsy and Brad. Your podcast about the origin 80s music was so not cool. You left out a ton of cool bands, like, tons of them. I'm not going to name names. That's your job. But you could do better, dudes.
Harsh, but fair.
You know, that voice sounds a little familiar. It's a little like Drew, if you ask me. Hit the next one.
Yeah, this is Lou. Lou, yeah. Not Drew, who, by the way, is doing a hell of a job. You guys better redo that music that started the 80s podcast, or I'll just keep leaving lame messages.
Yeah, I thought that was Drew. Hang on a second.
Hello, this is Lou. Drew. Oh, damn it.
Mm-hmm. Just as we suspected.
Pathetic.
Guys, I'm sorry. I wanted to do another podcast. I have so much more to say. And the fans have more to say. We need to do another Origin of the 80s show.
Why didn't you just say so? Cue the music and let's end this pathetic charade. Hey, welcome to Stuck in the 80s. It's your host, Steve Spears, and if today's topic sounds a little familiar, it is because we're doing now our tribute to the fans' picks for songs that started the 80s. With me today, my two pals from L.A., it's Brad and Drew.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, Steve. Yeah, apparently we didn't do a good enough job, so the fans wrote in a bunch of their own suggestions.
Well, you can only cover so much ground in,
That's
hour
true.
and 4 minutes.
Yeah.
But didn't you kind of expect and want that? I mean, I wanted the feedback.
Yeah, you put that out there and you make a statement. I mean, it's kind of funny. This is like what I do at work as a consultant. You can't just go into a room with people and say, what do you want to do? You have to come in with some idea so that they can say, I hate that, but let me tell you what I do like.
Boy, that's true.
That's nice. Let me hit the rewind button and explain the idea of the show. About a month ago, we got an email from Alex Stix Cardoso Solis from Tijuana, Mexico, and he had a great question for PPTMN. Please tell me now. And rather than just make it a portion of a show, we turned it into an entire show. And basically what he wanted to know was, what songs did we consider to be the beginning of the 80s sound, and what songs did we consider to be the end of the 80s sound? And we decided to break it into two shows and just do the songs that started the 80s as one podcast, and then later on we'd come back and do a show on the songs that end the 80s. But in the meantime, after the show came online and it got phenomenal downloads, it's probably our most popular show of this year.
Downloads are off the charts.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it was a great show, just flowed. But as soon as it was over, people were like, "Great show." But I'm surprised you didn't mention. Yeah, so we gathered 6 or 7 of your suggestions today, and so we're going to honor your suggestions. We'll talk about the songs that you think we missed out on for origin of the 80s or the sound of the 80s. And remember, the idea here is these are songs probably from the mid to late 70s that first gave us an idea of what the 80s were going to sound like. So these are not going to be 1980s songs, obviously.
Yeah, this is a great suggestion. It really does make you look further than just the decade of the 80s. You get to extend it a little bit, and I love this suggestion.
Yeah, anything that doesn't make us have to do another podcast on Back to the Future is fine by me.
Hey, I've seen this one. This is a classic.
But some of the bands we talked about on the last podcast were the Cars, Roxy Music. What were some of the other ones?
Blondie.
Yeah. I did some, oh my God, I can't remember what songs I did.
Didn't you pick an Anne Murray song?
I think I did. Some Air Supply. I know Air Supply is always one of my favorites.
You have been all out of love for some time.
They really were the masters of electronica.
Oh, Gary Newman. That was one of the ones.
Yeah,
That's Gary Newman. So here are our 6 for this episode. Let's get it started with this little gem that we've all not forgotten.
We were at a party. Dear love fell in the day. Someone reached in and grabbed it. What a rock lobster.
Rock Lobster, anybody from the B-52s?
Love it.
Yeah, how can you not like this song?
I can't believe we missed it. I mean, I think when we were thinking about bands, I know we mentioned the idea. Someone said B-52s, and then we never came back to it.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those kind of on the radar, and I decided that the things I picked, we talked about this last time. I was picking stuff that charted a little higher, but this is a great example.
Rock Lobster, written by Fred Schneider and Ricky Wilson, the B-52s. There are 2 versions of it out there. There's one that was released in 1978, and a longer version. I think it's about 7 minutes long.
Yeah, that's the album version that you...
Yeah, that's on the 1979 self-titled debut album by B-52s.
I don't think I've ever heard the single mix. I think I've only ever heard the album version.
Here's my theory about this song: impossible to dance to at our age. And maybe too hard to dance to when we were in our teens. I'm not sure.
I know that you would break a sweat. Yeah. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, you break a lot of things. You can't move. It's just it's like Prince. What was the song for the dry? It's the first song of Purple Rain.
Purple Rain, no. Or
hang on, I'm gonna cut back.
Cry?
Let's Go Crazy.
No. It's like Prince's "Let's Go Crazy." It's just a half a beat too fast for me to dance to. And
it has that long introspective speech at the beginning, so you have some time to catch your breath and position yourself on the dance floor.
Exactly.
Jesus. This was actually the first single from the B-52s to appear on the Hot 100 by Billboard. It only reached number 56.
Well, there was a lot of Stevie Wonder songs.
The kids
year.
Just weren't ready for this yet.
Exactly.
I guess you guys aren't ready for that yet.
Yeah, I'm sure that in Canada got it right though. In Canada, it was number 1 hit.
That's wild.
That is wild. We don't get to talk about Canada enough, but kudos to the Canucks for figuring that one out. The Rolling Stone magazine obviously named it one of their 500 greatest songs of all time. It ranked at number 147.
Nice.
I heard a quick story that Ricky Wilson called his sister, who was also in the band, and just said, "I have just written the stupidest guitar lick in rockin' history," and that was the famous down 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 down.
And it just repeats the whole song, over and over.
Yeah. I've heard this story, and I think I've confirmed it enough places where I feel comfortable repeating it. But John Lennon was said to have heard this song back in '79 and said, "It sounds just like Yoko Ono's music." Yeah. So it's time for me to get out and start making music again. And so that led to the album Double Fantasy. And Yoko Ono has, I think she was interviewed by songfacts.com back, maybe this year, and said the same thing. Yeah, John heard this album, said it reminded him of my music, and just decided he'd taken enough of a break and wanted to get back out and make new music again.
Yeah, I heard it was the scream at the end.
Yeah.
Exactly, that's what I heard. I mean, that's what Yoko said. It was that scream that John realized, God, this sounds just like
Wow,
Yoko.
I could do that.
Back in the 80s, I'm sure I told this story once upon a time. We used to do lip sync competitions at our high school. You guys didn't have that, did you?
No, sir.
We had one. Like karaoke lip sync thing competition at our school.
Huh. It was huge.
Wow.
In Tampa Bay. And they would set up the stage in the auditorium like a concert stage. You'd have fog machines. You'd have professional lighting. You had everything. There was a drum set. You had all the instruments. All you had to do is get up there and like with your little 5 friends and do whatever band you wanted to do. And we won. One year we did Blues Brothers, me and my friends. And then the second year we did Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Relax, and we won. And one of the perks to winning was then you went on tour. To all the other You did. You went on tour to all the other high schools. So when they had their lip sync competition, you'd be like, you were the act that played while the judges were making up their decision on who won.
Oh my God.
Like the showcase.
So you would go, and we went to a middle school and did our stuff. We went to a couple other high schools and did it. And one of the high schools we went to was Pinellas Park High School, which is in the middle of Pinellas County, Tampa Bay. And so we're sitting there waiting to go on, and these just ridiculously dressed nerds walk out in front of us and did Rock Lobster by the B-52s. And it blew us away. They were so good. They had all these little crazy props. They used all this paint that, glow in the dark paint and neon paint. So as the show lights went on and off, different figures started to appear on stage and stuff like that. It was like watching America's Got Talent, basically. Oh. And they got booed off the stage.
Really?
Pinellas Park is a tough place to play. When they got booed off the stage, and I'm thinking Frankie Goes to Hollywood has to follow the B-52s, and they booed them off the stage.
Now you know how Human League felt at the Bowl a couple years ago. Oh, man.
Yeah. That's the other thing we have in common. We all saw this song performed live in Hollywood. What was it? Has it been 3 years now?
Yeah.
3 years, yeah.
And that was actually a dream of mine to see this song. I mean, there's certain songs as you're growing up and you think, oh, I'd really like to see this song played live. I always wanted to see Elton John do Rocket Man live, and I did get to see that. But honestly, the B-52s doing Rock Lobster, that was one of my, I really want to see this live kind of moments. And I got to see it, and that was really cool. There's
probably been a couple times in Stuck in 80s history where I said, I've kind of heard enough of the B-52s. I've heard enough of their music. I don't want to think about them anymore. I don't really want to do a show about them. And then when I saw that concert in LA, they blew me away. That was one of the best live performances I've seen.
They are so good live.
30 years.
They're so good live. And I feel the same way, Steve. You're just like, B-52s. I never need to hear Love Shack ever. But when they play it live, I'm up there jumping around, dancing, singing, trying to take crappy videos with my cell phone. It's they're amazing live. If 80s Nation, you get the chance to go and see them and you pass it up, you stink.
If you do get a chance to see them, don't sit next to Brad though, because he's up there jumping
around, dancing, taking pictures.
You don't want to be seen near that.
Yeah, it's not pretty. It's not pretty.
So who's next?
We had another suggestion from a reader that was Money, That's What I Want, the old cover from the Barrett Strong Motown hit. And this one was covered by the Flying Lizards, really a guy named David Cunningham.
Your love gives me such a thrill. But your love won't pay my bills. I want money. That's what I want. That's what I want. That's what I want.
So this song was recorded in 1979, or released in 1979, I should say. And they recorded it in Cunningham's living room. And it was kind of funny because they loved the song, but Cunningham was kind of a pop satirist. And so he wasn't really trying to do anything great with the song. He was actually kind of making fun of pop music. And they recorded it in his living room. They had a piano in there that was taking up, they only had one mic. So they took and threw stuff on the piano strings to dampen the sound, like telephone books, stuff like that. And they recorded this song in one day, and it ended up going to number 50 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart.
That's crazy. I had no idea this song was released that early. I just kind of had this pegged in my mind as kind of a mid-'80s song.
I think like everybody else, I heard this song for the first time in the Wedding Singer soundtrack.
No, I mean, it got, again, not to rub it in, but it did get airtime on K-Rock in the mid-'80s, and I just assumed that's where it came from. That was a mid-'80s track.
Guys in your K-Rock.
I know.
We like to rub it in.
Flashing it around. I know. I don't think
twirling
I ever
my
heard
mustache as we talk.
maybe it was on MTV, but I remember, and to me still, I credit Wedding Singer and with starting the whole 80s Renaissance, the whole 9 yards. But it's definitely, I would have almost called it not a gimmicky song, but
I think it's very gimmicky.
Kind of novelty-ish.
Novelty-ish, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But for some reason, it just works. And some of the theories are it's because it still has basically the hook, the great hook from the 60s song, but it as deconstructed as it was, it still worked. And like I said, it got to number 50. So, which is, I think, a little high for a song like that.
The lyric is just so deliciously deadpan.
Yeah.
Which is, again, something we talked about with Gary Newman, how it was just, and I use your word a lot these days, it's so detached. It's like, I want money.
Sometimes I almost think I like the music of 1979 better than, in 1979, some amazing stuff came out and really kind of showed us a glimpse of what was going to happen. But it didn't really happen for another 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. Didn't really catch everyone's attention for a little bit.
But my God, you just talk about, lightning in a bottle, 1979. Just amazing stuff.
Well, I think it's part of the cycles of music where the stuff that's been around, it's been around for 3 or 4 years now, and it's starting to really play its course. It's kind of reached a point where everybody's a little bit oversaturated with it. You start getting a lot of the boy bands, and then someone new comes out with something different, and that leads to a different revolution. I think that's what was going on in 79.
So speaking of revolutions, we'll go to my first choice here. I'm going to hit you guys with one that I actually suggested as one of my alternates in the last show. Someone else also got on board with I Can't Get No Satisfaction by Devo.
I think I actually made the mistake of using this one time as a Name That 80s Tune
yeah.
clip, and people jumped on me like, that's not from the 80s.
Well, cowboy up. So on October 14th, 1978, Devo was a musical guest on Saturday Night Live. They were 1 week. That was the second show of that season, and they followed the Rolling Stones as musical guests. The Rolling Stones were the musical guests on the season premiere that year. And they played their cover of Satisfaction from their debut album, Are We Not Men, We Are Devo, which was released in 1978. So I thought that's a little gutsy.
Yeah, it's a little ballsy.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and it's kind of, a little bit of an in your face. And, there've been times I know that they've asked Mick Jagger what he thinks of it, and he's pretty sarcastic about it. It's like, I prefer their version to our own, this kind of stuff. But, yeah, so this is off the 78 studio debut, or their major label debut, I guess you'd call it, with Warner Brothers. So that was kind of famously produced by Brian Eno, and a lot is made of that. But the reality is Brian Eno and Devo did not get along at all. Like he really wanted to add a lot more kind of production to it, and they really wanted to no, we recorded the demo like this. This is how we want to do it, and so there's a lot of friction between them. But the thing I found out just today, I didn't realize this, is that Devo didn't have a record deal when they recorded this album, so Brian Eno basically fronted all of the costs to produce this album. He paid for them to fly over to Germany to do the recordings. He paid for all the studio time, all that stuff up front.
You weren't sure what you paid for. I want to know who's going to pay for this.
And did he make his money back? I'm assuming.
I would think he did. Yeah, but it's interesting. You don't really hear a lot about Brian Eno and Devo after this. Like they kind of seem to have gone their separate ways.
What I'm surprised about is hearing that Eno was part of this. How much you could do 2 or 3 podcasts just on bands that Eno helped.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm amazed. I didn't realize he had his hand in so many different groups.
Yeah, I mean, not only was he doing a lot of production, but he was doing a lot of his own stuff too. Yeah, we could do like an 8-part retrospective on Brian Eno and just scratch the surface.
Is he the Great White Buffalo now? Stuck in the 80s interview lore.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing.
I'd be out of my water.
Yeah, I would have to we'd have to schedule that for 6 months out so I could get ready.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, that's how. I mean, I remember one time I had an interview, not set up, but I mean, I got approval to do an interview with Devo, and I didn't end up not doing it because I'm just like, geez, what do I have to say?
I remember you were asking me what you should ask them.
I know. I was asking everybody because I'm like, I don't know. It's just, just one of those things. I'm like, nah, this is not going to go well.
Ask them if they remember signing that poster for me when they did an in-store in Westwood.
Yeah.
In support of the Total Devo release. I still have that poster.
Here's another song that was suggested by the readers as one of the songs that we missed in our Origin of the 80s podcast. This is Train in Vain by The Clash. Okay, guys, pop quiz, true or false? This song is a hidden track on their album London Calling.
That's true.
It's true. I knew that one.
It's sort of true.
It's not listed.
It's not listed, but it was not intentionally not listed. It was a song that was recorded literally at the last minute. The sleeve for London Calling had already been produced, or at least production had begun. So most editions of London Calling do not show the song. A few do.
Okay. So your question really wasn't a true or false.
It was true and false?
Yes. So it was a trick question. So I'm the asshole.
It's our own little Kobayashi Maru.
It's a little Kobayashi Maru for you there.
Just Steve trying to be superior again.
Yeah, you guys knew anything about music. No, that's clearly.
Well, for years I had believed that it was like the hidden track, but it was not intentionally done that way. It was just a production snafu.
So intentions are what count now?
Yes.
I didn't intend to kill him, officer. Oh, off you go.
Attention is everything.
So I don't think it was a production snafu. What I had seen was that it was supposed to be a giveaway. The track alone was going to be a giveaway in a magazine.
Then they
decided not to. Okay.
But then at the last minute they decided it wasn't going to work for that, so they decided to put it on the album instead.
Okay.
But it was never really meant to be a hidden track. For that matter, I can't imagine the Clash getting involved in let's put a hidden track on an album. It just
does seem a little strange.
It seems a little Pet Shop Boys to me.
Well, I'm really glad somebody suggested a Clash song because I felt like we had kind of missed a bet there on that one.
Yeah. Again, Rolling Stone lists this as one of the 500 greatest songs of all time. It was sadly ranked number 298. In the U.S., a lot of times the song's title is expanded to Train in Vain and then in parentheses, Stand By Me, because you don't hear the words Train in Vain in the song.
Now, I also saw something that said that this was the first top 40 hit for The Clash in the U.S.
Yeah, I believe it was. And, London Calling is an amazing album. And if you really want to, I don't even think this song doesn't really, to me, even sound like it belongs on that album.
It's definitely a different sound for them. But it's one of the reasons I like that song so much.
But it's very poppy.
Yeah.
And the rest of the album is not. But that's okay. I mean, we all have to, feed our families. I was looking around. I was looking around for the meaning of the song.
Or our heroin habit.
Yeah.
What are you doing in Valencia? Jeez.
I'm talking about the Clash, not us.
Oh, okay.
It was
we do math
out here. Your intention was not clear.
Math.
Your intention was not clear.
Hey, listen, guys. Look, I don't want to mess with no reefer addicts, okay?
So, Train in Vain supposedly is, there's a couple of different theories as to what Train in Vain means. Mick Jones, who wrote most of the song, said that the song has a train rhythm and a feeling of being lost, and so that's where the song title comes from. Joe Strummer has said in multiple interviews that it has more to do with Mick Jones, who used to take the train ride across the country to see his girlfriend all the time, and that those visits would often end with him not accomplishing what he went out there to get. Hence, Train in Vain.
We had another great suggestion from our listener, and this one was the Talking Heads' Psycho Killer.
I can't seem to face up to the facts. I'm tense and nervous and I can't relax. I can't sleep 'cause my bed's on fire. Don't touch me, I'm a real live wire.
The funny thing for me about this song, I actually considered it for our original podcast on the origins of the 80s, but I felt like, although this is a really unique song, it wasn't so much to me about what songs were going to sound like in the 80s, but more like what the Talking Heads were going to sound like in the 80s. The Talking Heads to me were always so unique and different in everything they did.
Yeah.
That, again, yeah, and you know, I've established that I like the weird stuff of the 80s, but even then...
Fact.
Even then, it still is really... It's the Talking Heads in the 80s.
Yeah.
That it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
So it kind of is a standalone. They're unique enough that that's kind of why I left it off. But
yeah, I know when our first go round, I was one of my kind of shortlisted candidates was Life During Wartime, which is off of Fear of Music. Fear of Music was produced by anyone?
Brian Eno.
Brian Eno, because that's a shot.
Yeah.
Jeez.
You know what's the funny thing about Talking Heads and Psycho Killer to me is that when I think of this song, I think of the version that appears in the concert movie Stop Making Sense.
Mm-hmm.
And
which is the first song, I believe, right?
It is the first song. And I just watched that again like 2 weeks ago. And just, it's still as amazing today as it was back then. But I remember I'd heard that version a million times over before I finally heard the original 1977 version. And I'm amazed at how different they are.
I'm really more familiar with the album version.
Yeah, me too.
I just, the movie, you know, the documentary thing, it didn't get me, but so I'm more familiar with the album version.
And this is a great album, period. I mean, I remember somebody turned me on to this album, and I think it was the late 80s before I heard this for the first time. And we played it from start to finish one night, and probably while we were drinking Manhattans or something stupid like that.
Wait, what? I'm sorry. What's so stupid about a Manhattan?
Oh no, I had one Manhattan in my entire life, and my grandmother gave it to my grandfather, and then my grandfather said, "Why don't you try it?" You know, I was like, all right. And I took one sip of it and almost spit it out. Well, and then he was mad at me because I was wasting alcohol.
Well, good for him. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with a classic cocktail made with 2 parts bourbon, 1 part sweet vermouth, a dash of Angostura bitters, and garnished with a cherry. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, maybe not. But it wasn't for my taste.
Feels very grandfathery.
It's a classic cocktail for a reason.
It is a classic cocktail for a classic generation.
Yeah.
Which my grandparents were.
What's the other cocktail you make with it's a sweeter cocktail you make with whiskey. It's
an old fashioned?
Maybe that's it.
With simple sugar?
I'm not the guy to be answering this one.
Yeah. I mean, cause you are allergic to alcohol. Have we covered that before in the show? God.
Yeah, whereas I'm a freaking walking drink encyclopedia.
My dad used to drink these crazy, what was it? Maybe it was
I am enjoying another Bloody Mary garnished with a green
You're
onion.
garnishing your drinks again.
Is it an onion? Was it a green onion?
Once again, I'm not a caveman. We live in a civilized land. We're allowed to make, to garnish our drinks.
God. But the only thing that garnishes a drink is my liver.
That's gross.
It's falling apart as we speak. Anyway, Brad,
sorry,
can you put your garnishes aside?
Oh wait, no, I have a real quick thing because of Tina Weymouth I heard a story from her, and this is a long time after the song had come out, and apparently they were all back together. You know, Weymouth's kind of like not a big fan of David Byrne, and she said apparently he said at one point, like in a later interview, he said, "I really liked that I came up with the Qu'est-ce que c'est after I said Psycho Killer. I just thought that really gave that song a really unique."
Je ne sais quoi.
Yeah. And Weymouth was pissed because she's like, I thought up that line. And she just felt that was typical of Byrne just to kind of take credit for everything. So that's my little Weymouth story on that.
Nice. So my second pick here is one that was suggested, I think, on the Facebook page. I'm sorry to say that I did not write down the name of the listener that posted this, but it's Hiroshima Mon Amour by Ultravox.
Riding into city trains, dressed in European grey, riding out to Echo Beach, a million memories in the trees and sands. Oh no, how can I ever let them go? Hiroshima, mon amour.
I had never heard this song. I saw the suggestion and had to go and check it out. But it's probably important to mention that the title was actually the title of a film, which came out in 1959, before even Steve Spears was born. It's a French film about a French-Japanese couple, and I guess it's very popular with the film nerds because it is so unbelievably hip about its use of flashbacks to create a non-linear storyline. And Drew, you know all about non-linear storylines because you're a non-linear editor.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that I get to do it.
I know.
Someone else comes along and says, like you said, you have to show them something that you like so they can go, that sucks.
Yeah, they we always said, give them your second favorite idea first.
Yeah, seriously.
So anyway, our work angst notwithstanding, fast forward to 1977 and Ultravox releases the first of two versions of Hiroshima Mon Amour. The one you just heard it's an interesting blend. It's got this heavy electronica sound of the 80s.
Sounds pretty heavy. Well, it has nothing to do with it.
It's got an early use of a Roland TR-77 drum machine. But the other thing that really jumped out at me was sax solo. And nothing screams 80s more to me than a saxophone solo.
Especially if it's a really muscular guy, kind of oiled up, no shirt. Like Lost Boys.
You're kind of grossing me out right now.
I'm just saying.
That song.
Yeah, but I could have done without the visuals. That was weird.
It was a weird visual, but it made for so many great Saturday Night Live skits.
Yes, it did.
Yeah. Anybody with a tenor sax is cringing at that. But.
Yeah. I have to go with Brad on this. I had never heard this song. And when I started listening to it just for the podcast, I loved it. I bought it.
Yeah, it's a really cool song.
It's really cool.
It's a really good song. But it does kind of bridge those two things. It's got the sax solo, it's got the drum machine, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I mean, I'm much more familiar with some of the Ultravox's more mainstream stuff like Dancing with Tears in My Eyes, which is actually a cover of like a 20s song. And Reap the Wild Wind. But this is great. It's in my library now, like you said.
I know that it's been covered a lot. The Church covered this song, I think, in the late 90s. Brian Ferry in the 2002, I believe, had a single called Hiroshima that makes a reference to Hiroshima Mon Amour. It's definitely one of those songs that, like the film itself, the hipsters, attach themselves to and really point to, hey, if you're, a fan of this sound, you need to know this song.
Well, the hipsters may attach themselves to this song, but you know what I'd like to attach myself to? The Seggies.
Hey, it's time for Reader Mailbag, and got 2 letters this week, and we're going to split up the reading duties here.
You said duty. Sorry, I had to. The first letter comes from Chris Salmond, and he says, "What? I finally get a song right, taken in, and you don't mention my name? What do I got to do to get some love around here? I'm mad, upset, and confused all at once, but I'm also forever stuck in the 80s. Arrivederci." Chris Salmond, DWS, we get initials on this one, pastor of worship and technology, New Hope Baptist Church in Loveland, Ohio.
Pastor of worship and technology? Those things go against each other?
I know.
That's like a title from a Dune novel.
I know.
I feel bad because Chris, I think, was the first one who got the Name That 80s tune from the previous show by Mike and the Mechanics. Because literally, I think only 3 or 4 people got it right, and he was the first time. And I wrote back and forth to him. How I missed his name when I was doing the notes is beyond me.
Well, yeah,
we got on the garnish.
We got to talking about something else, and I neglected to read the winners. Last week's Name That 80s Tunes winners include Chris in Cincinnati, Bass Note, Kevin Wench, and Marie in Kissimmee. Stuck in the 80s, deeply regrets any pain and suffering caused by this omission. So, our second letter is from longtime podcast friend Tor Hansen.
Excellent.
Haven't heard from Tor in a while. Hi, Steve. Hi, Steve. Yeah, nice. Thanks, Tor. Hi, Steve. Great podcast on The Sure Thing. I do like the movie, though, in terms of entertainment factor. It tips too heavily into schmaltz for me to like it as much as Better Off Dead. Not that I am anesthetized to the high spirits of gooey romance. Can't Buy Me Love gets me every time. It's a good one.
No, it's not.
Oh, I love Can't Buy Me Love.
I don't get gooey. It's just it's funny.
He is. Yeah, he's saying the romance of the movie is gooey. Oh, never mind.
Okay.
I like Can't Buy Me Love. The end. African Anteater Dance. Always funny.
That is
See,
always funny.
You're laughing. Speaking of 80s comedies, I've been tracking down some of those I didn't get to see in the 80s or just forgot I'd seen. My favorites so far include Vamp, Get Crazy, and my personal pick for repeat viewing, Secret Admirer. It may be the best C. Thomas Howell released between 1985 and 1986.
The long storied career of C. Thomas Howell.
Intermittently sloppy and clever, but seldomly dull, it features Kelly Preston at a time when she may well have been the most stunning female on the planet. But what I found most intriguing is how the movie actually captures some of the rending insecurities of being a teenager and puppy love, even in its douchiest characters. It never fully works as a film, but I suspect I will be watching it over and over again for its unique melange of the elements that comprise 1980s teen movie storytelling. And yes, C. Thomas Howell does pronounce larynx in the film. I'm not sure I follow, but okay. I'm just reading I'm But a Vessel here. In the interest of making this a reader mailbag mystery movie moment, name that 80s tune, please tell me now email. Please tell me now, are there any sub-successful 80s gems that you guys return to again and again because they just capture something for you? Thanks again to you and Brad. Ah, there we go. Tor.
Well, we can't have a PPTMN without the theme music, so here we go.
Please tell me now. Please tell me now.
It's time for PPTMN, and as you already know, Tor Hansen has the question for this week. Are there any sub-successful 80s gems, movie-wise, I guess, that you guys return to again and again because they just capture something for you?
Oh, was he talking about movies?
Yeah, I was thinking music.
I was thinking music.
We'll do both.
God,
Okay.
yeah. Let me think about movies for a second. I mean, see, for me, it's kind of tough because I immediately go to like Red Dawn, which I know did pretty well, and even got that horrible remake. But if you watch it now, it's really not a good movie. So
I don't know.
it's not. It doesn't hold up that well.
Yeah. I'll give you that.
You like it because you liked it then. You watched
Exactly.
it because you liked it then.
Exactly.
I cannot separate my feelings for it then with my feelings for it now.
Yes.
And that is the great paradox of Stuck in the 80s. It's that a lot of the things we talk about now, unless you saw them back then, they're not going to do anything for you now. It's like Making the Grade. That movie, never saw it back then. When I saw it again a few years ago, I hated it. I don't get it. So blame it on Andrew Dice Clay. A movie that I loved, Summer Lovers would be the one for me. Daryl Hannah.
Okay.
Is it Peter Gallagher?
Yeah.
Daryl Hannah and the French actress who's now dead, whose name I can't pronounce.
Wow.
The dead one? Yeah.
The dead one. The dead French actress.
Catherine
it's a movie. Now, it's set, I think it was 1982, and it's set in the Greek Isles. Peter Gallagher brings his girlfriend Daryl Hannah there to spend the summer, and they end up both falling in love with this French woman who's there, and all sorts of sexual hijinks.
And shika-bow wow.
Yeah.
Oh, you make it sound so easy.
But yeah, I remember 1982, so what am I, 14, 15 years old, and this is showing on HBO. I mean, that's, thank you, God.
Yeah, I can see why that would be popular. For me, the movie Hot Dog was that movie.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I love that.
That was
watch
very
that every
popular
time
with my friends.
With your friends,
Well, with my friends and I. Let me finish. I'll get on board with it. I had Sunny Side Up and Sunny Side Down and Sunny Side all around. So I think for me, for movies, it would be stuff like that was, the kind of, schedule filler stuff that they had on HBO at the time. So Hot Dog the movie is a great example. Flash Gordon. Which I don't know, maybe that's not maybe that's not sub-successful.
That's my problem, is it's sub-successful,
Yeah. And Cannonball Run. The original Cannonball Run.
I love Cannonball Run.
It's so funny. It's just so dumb,
And the bloopers at the end.
Yeah. These bleeds, these rosary bleeds.
As far as music goes, anything by the Thompson Twins. For me, that is, you don't hear them anymore on the radio. And for me, when you hear Lay Your Hands on Me or King for a Day or anything like that, to me, that brings me back straight to the 80s.
Yeah, I think I was probably too dismissive of Thompson Twins when they were actually popular. And now when I hear it, I'm like, this is really good music.
Yeah, I was a huge fan of the Thompson Twins. So for me, oddly enough, it's Billy Squier, I think, is one that, not his, The Stroke, but that whole album, Don't Say No. I think it's a great album. And it just didn't do well. And other than the one song, maybe it had 1.5 hits on it.
Yeah.
But I freaking love that album.
Billy Squier was just the bomb. I feel so sad. Sorry for him, I guess is the word. To have his whole career pretty much implode because of one really bad music video.
Yeah.
Directed by Kenny Ortega.
Yeah.
Who did,
High School Musical.
Yep.
And who pretty much killed Michael Jackson, right?
Yeah.
Twice.
He also choreographed Dirty Dancing.
Yeah.
So the guy's been everywhere.
So speaking of Dirty Dancing, there was a thing in the Times this week. There was a obituary for Patrick Swayze's mom.
Yeah.
She lived out in Simi Valley.
Yeah.
And there was a picture. I'll see if I can find it online and link to it. But there's a picture of her and Patrick Swayze in her dance studio doing some move. I texted you the picture, Steve. I don't know if you saw it.
Yeah, I got it.
It's a great picture. But suddenly I'm like, oh, that's where Patrick Swayze learned how to move.
Oh, yeah.
His mom was like, you will do it again. Do it again.
Yeah. His mom taught dance out here forever.
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So what came to mind when I saw this question, again, I thought about music, but music is to me, it's so contextual, like time and place, like music will take you to a certain time and place. And there was a band that my older sister was really into that was like a Wichita, Kansas band. So they were touring in Oklahoma. And they had one album that was out. The name of the band is The Clocks. Nobody has heard of this band. I think their claim to fame was someone thought their album cover was groovy once. And it's just like kind of normal bar band, straight ahead rock and roll. But I love that album because when I hear it, again, I'm cruising around. I'm 16 or 17 years old, cruising around this little town I grew up in, and life is good.
I saw her picture on the cover. Somebody's photogenic lover. But when I looked into her eyes, I was taken by surprise. I thought I recognized her. She looks a lot like you.
I think that's the kind of memories that get tied into music that you listen to a lot when you're younger.
Yeah. Definitely.
Well, it's definitely a great question. Thanks, Tor. Pretty thought-provoking. If you have a PPTMN for us, email us at sit80s@gmail.com or steveinthe80s@gmail.com or bradinthe80s@gmail.com. Just remember to put PPTMN in the subject line. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
Roger, you always flunk Valentine's Day.
Hey, the basketball was funny.
Oh, very funny.
And the hamster was cute. Cute. And this year I'm giving you the FTD Candy Hearts Bouquet.
Don't kid me, Roger.
Beautiful flowers, these red hot candies. Get your red hots.
Don't spoil it.
Get your red hots.
You're learning.
Make up for lost time. Send your Valentine an FTD Candy Hearts Bouquet.
Please don't let this feeling end.
Can't seem to face up to the facts. I'm tense and nervous, can't relax.
And we're back.
I actually was going to write in a letter, and then you guys asked me to be on this podcast, but I was going to write in a letter and tell you guys kind of about one of my road trips a la, the Sure Thing.
Okay.
One of those like...
Yeah, hit us.
All right, so I'm in high school. It's my senior year of high school, and it's actually the weekend of my senior prom, and I'm not going. I hadn't wanted to go. There's no one I was...
Oh, poor
No,
Drew.
I really just wasn't...
I'm not interested, man. I don't want to go. No.
And a buddy of mine who was a few years older...
Single tear tracks down Drew's face.
Yeah, right. He says, hey, let's go on a road trip. Let's go visit your sister up in college. Now, my sister went to Humboldt State, which is about 100 miles south of the Oregon border. So we're down in Los Angeles. He decides like 11 o'clock at night, let's go visit your sister and we'll just spend the weekend up there. And I'm like, all right. So we hop in his mini truck and we start driving. And the original idea was he was going to like drive for a while, and I would sleep in the passenger seat. And then when he got tired, we'd switch. But every time I'd start to fall asleep, he'd get bored and lonely, so he'd slam on the brakes and wake me up, right? So I'm not getting any sleep. And we're just north of San Francisco. It's dawn, and I'm now driving. He's asleep in the passenger seat. And I'm starting to do I'm kind of drifting a little bit. Yeah. And so I see there's a park up in the next off ramp, and I'm like, all right, I'm just going to pull over. I could just crash on the side of the road, just sleep for like 20, 30 minutes, and I'll be good, and then I'll be able to drive. So I pull off the off ramp, and there's the curb. There's about 10 feet of grass, and then about a 6-foot brick wall, and then the park. But I can park right there at the curb, and I can just sleep on the grass right next to the road, and it's fine. So I get out of the car, and I lay down on the grass, and I take my sweater, and I put it underneath my head, and I'm sleeping, and I don't know how long I was asleep, but Jeff's waking me up. He's like nudging me, and he's like, dude, what are we doing? And I said, I was just so tired I had to sleep. He said, that's fine, but what are we doing in a cemetery? And I stand up and I look over the wall, and sure enough, I had not even noticed one of the headstones in the park. And I'm just like, I don't know, it's quiet. I don't know.
It's not a park.
Yeah. So we get back in the car. We end up, we cannonball it all the way up. And it's like, for those on the East Coast who don't really understand, California is a really long state. And it's about a 15-hour drive from Los Angeles up to Humboldt State and Arcata. And we get up there and we're having a good time. And here's kind of the connection to Sure Thing. My sister was on the crew team. She was the coxswain for the rowing team, and for both the men and the women's team. And she says, hey, they're having a party tonight. Let's go to the party. So we go there, and there's all these, rowers and everything, including the women's heavyweight team.
Yeah, they'll rip your head off.
And what?
I'm sure they would have ripped your head off.
Oh, yeah. Well, this one comes up to me, and she says, hi, I'm the woman of your dreams. And it scared me so bad. I was so because I'm like 17, right? And I'm just like, hi,
I don't think so.
I gotta go. And I turned around and I booked it. And just like Gibby and Sure Thing, my weekend ended with no sex going on, and I went home safely intact, I guess is a good way of putting it.
Your honor remained
Something
with you.
was intact.
Yeah. So I've always kind of felt like this little. I've had that moment that Gibby had, traveling cross country, and it seemed like cross country, going 15 hours, but it was a great trip, and it was really a lot of fun. And I missed all the drama, and of course I come back from that weekend, and everybody else is, oh, so-and-so broke up, and these two people hooked up, and I just was like, oh, I had a nice road trip. So that's my Sure Thing.
That's a better story than any prom story would have ever been.
Yeah, that's probably true.
But I have to ask you though, I mean, have you ever regretted like hightailing it, turning around from the woman of your dreams?
No, because she was on the heavyweight team, and it's not that I have anything against athletic women. I've always liked athletic builds and everything, but she was a bit too built, I guess is a polite way of putting it. So no, I've never really regretted it.
Okay, that's the important thing.
I guess so. Yeah.
As we mentioned earlier, the original question from Alex was he wanted to know songs that started the 80s and songs that ended the 80s in our minds. And so I guess it makes sense now to ask you, the people who listen to the show, send us in your suggestions for what songs you think ended the last songs of the 80s. The last songs
we can
that
ignore
truly
them.
sounded.
We can ignore them, and then we can make our own picks, and then we can use you to squeeze a fourth show out of a single question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because we need show ideas badly, but give us your picks for songs.
Do.
It might be something like it could be a song that's like, this is the last time I remember hearing the 80s sound, or it could be this is a song that almost started to kick off the new sound of the 80s type of thing. I've been kind of racking my brain trying to think of it because for the most part I had turned my brain off come 1987 because I just couldn't deal with the music anymore. So it's going to be hard for me to research this particular one. So any suggestions you have, I'll take them.
Yeah, I've been thinking about, more like themes, like the sax solo thing. I think, find me the last top 40 hit that actually had a sax solo. That kind of stuff. We'll
start combing the Hall & Oates and Quarter Flash.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
I think Quarter Flash was gone by...
I was going to say.
84.
God, I loved them, though. I hope we get a chance before Stuck in Ease finally in someday to do our epic two-parter on Quarter Flash. You know the addresses by now. It's sit80s@gmail.com, StevenThe80s, BradThe80s@gmail.com. Drew,
yes,
thanks
sir.
for leaving all the messages on the answering machine.
Well, I get lonely.
And I'm glad we came back, the three of us. I think we recaptured the magic from 2 shows ago. This is a fun topic. I could talk about it forever.
Yeah.
And Brad, as always,
you know what I say, Steve. 80s Nation, keep garnishing.
I'm gonna go garnish something right now. In the meantime, myself, Drew, Brad, and all the talking heads, we remain here, hopelessly stuck in the 80s.
Stuck in the 80s is a Class of 85 production. Please listen responsibly.